John McMullen here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline, and he's brought to you by Harrah's Resort, Bally's Atlantic City, Wild Wild West. They're taking bets at the new sportsbook. So break up with your bookie today at the book and wager. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Johnny Mac is in the house with some news surrounding Derek Barnett, John. And I guess, he missed a game, then he was back for a couple. How surprising was the news from Adam Schefter today that Barnett will miss the rest of the season?
Yeah, it was very surprising, and it happened about a minute after Jim Schwartz left the podium. So that was the most surprising part, that the Eagles kind of leak it to Adam Schefter at the appropriate time. But he tried to play through it. Remember, he injured it against Tennessee in that overtime loss. He missed the Vikings game and then tried to come back over the past 2 weeks and play through it. Obviously didn't work out, so he's going to be undergoing surgery, done for the season. And, if you look at the litany of injuries this team is facing, and this is not a criticism of Derek Barnett, but this is probably the deepest position on this team. So if there's a position where they can handle an injury like this, defensive end is probably that position.
Yeah, I was going to say, what are the ramifications? I mean, I like Barnett, so I'm not saying, man, thank God they lost Barnett. But is there a silver lining that a guy like Bennett has been kind of wanting more time, that he's going to get his wish?
Yeah, he is, and that is the silver lining, because that's a heck of a good player who's used to playing a lot in Seattle, and as you mentioned, has had, I wouldn't say a difficult time accepting the rotation, but it's not his preference, and anytime he's on the field, you're a better team. So in a weird way, it might even help a little bit. What's been going on is Michael Bennett has been the guy to sort of slide inside and play most of the interior snaps next to Fletcher Cox. Last year, that was Brandon Graham's role. Now you probably revert back to that. So you have Michael Bennett playing right end. In the NASCAR package, you move Brandon Graham inside. Then you have Chris Long at left end. And Fletcher Cox is obviously the star of it all. So that's still a pretty good defensive line, and one of the best in the league. And then you'll have some Josh Sweat snaps. He'll step up a little bit and get into that defensive end rotation. And obviously he's a rookie with a lot of promise. He's not Derek Barnett, but as I said, you never want to lose a player like that. But they are so deep at that position, I think they'll be able to persevere.
Yeah, going on that, John, do you think that Jim Schwartz tightens up the rotation because it's now become more top-heavy due to the loss of guys like Jernigan before and now Barnett? Meaning, like, you're right, Sweat will get a couple of snaps, but Schwartz is known for going so deep in that specific positions rotation. Do you think he tightens it up?
Yeah, he's got to a little bit because you have lost, as you mentioned, some significant pieces. Tim hasn't been here all year. He's already done that inside. And it's gotten worse with Haloti Ngata missing 3 consecutive games. He was supposed to be a part of that, and sort of the first and second down run stuffer. So he hasn't been available. It's been a bigger issue at defensive tackle. Defensive end, he was the same way. He had all 4 playing significant snaps, all 4 playing well. Now you're down to 3. And yeah, I don't think Josh Sweat just steps in to that 4th role, which would have been Chris Long. So everybody gets kicked up a notch, and I think Michael Bennett is the one that's going to get the most of those snaps, of those Derek Barnett snaps. And like I said, if you're going to rate the defensive linemen on this team, it's Fletcher Cox, and then it's Brandon Graham and Michael Bennett neck and neck for number 2. So I don't think that necessarily hurts you.
John, there's been a lot of talk of the Eagles potentially trading for an external player, but do you think that a trade at this time could negatively impact the locker room? Like last year when the Eagles traded for Ajayi, it was, we're doing well. Let's add another guy and let's get locked and loaded and be even more unstoppable. Now with the Eagles struggling and they make that move, the message could be perceived to the players as, you're not good enough. This is why we're doing it. And then guys can get mad and frustrated. Do you see that being a possibility, or is that looking into it too deep?
No, I think so. I think it's looking at it too deep. I mean, there are a lot of those questions last year. There was a lot of that, saying, you're playing so well, why do you need to bring Jay Ajayi in? And he kind of fit in seamlessly.
Yeah.
And this is a really, really strong locker room. The leaders in this locker room, that's one of the strengths of this organization. Howie Roseman's always going to look to improve. Ultimately, I do think he makes a deal. It's just depending where and for what. To me, the shift comes, look, this team's struggling. They're underwater now. They're 3-4. And now the injuries are starting to pile up, and significant injuries. And you have to ask yourself some harsh questions. Is the window open? Can you really compete with the LA Rams and the New Orleans Saints? If that answer is yes, you try to make a deal to make your team as best as possible. If that answer is no, you don't want to mortgage the future just to win the NFC East and maybe get a playoff win. So I think that has to be more of the questions. In other words, if you're looking at a player like Patrick Peterson, that's gonna take significant assets to get. And are you in a position to compete right away to get that type of player? I don't know if that's the case any longer.
There was a report last night. Now, it was odd because I guess McFadden is Peterson's cousin, and he kind of tweeted out that a couple teams might be interested. And it was almost as if Peterson told his cousin, like, hey, these two teams want me. And then Locke and Forrest said that, hey, these two teams, the Saints and Eagles, have been working on a deal. Now, we know the Saints made a deal for Eli Apple today, which kind of leaves the Eagles singularly there to have a conversation with Arizona. One, do you believe that Philadelphia is making calls? And two, do you think Arizona is interested in trading Peterson, even though they said absolutely not?
Peterson wants out, so that becomes the issue. I don't think Arizona wants to trade him. That's their best player.
Right.
But how
and
badly
they have said there's no way they're trading him.
Exactly. And I don't think they want to trade him, but it becomes a situation where and he's never been that type of guy to get that disgruntled where he creates a lot of issues. So ultimately, I do think he stays in Arizona because I don't know why you would want to trade a talent like that still at the top of his game. That's an all-pro level corner. And it's certainly the conversation for me starts with a first-round pick. So people talking about the Eagles giving up an extra second-rounder that they have for Patrick Peterson, I can't imagine in a million years that gets it done. So they're going to be asking for significant assets. And ultimately, I don't think they even want to trade. So it becomes how disgruntled is he and can he force his way out? Obviously, he wants to go to a situation where he can compete, and that would be New Orleans, supposedly, was his first choice. They were probably never in the equation because they don't have a first-round pick anyway, and now they're definitely out of it because they got Eli Apple. So, hey, Howie Roseman's making calls. There's no question about that.
Well, should a call or maybe a follow-up call if the first one was made, should that have been made to Rashard Matthews, who signs with the Jets today?
Well, I mean, I've talked a lot that there's guys who can run out there and maybe can give you some kind of presence on the edge of this offense, because I think that's been an issue really the entire season, certainly since Carson has been back and not able to play with Mike Wallace. I mean, that's not a player that thrills me. I don't think it's going to change things dramatically.
Well, I don't know if there's anybody out there that will at this point, right?
No. Well, and Patrick Peterson would be
I
in the
meant
trade
from
market.
an offensive standpoint. Sorry, John.
Yeah, I mean, if you're getting guys off the street, you're getting guys like Dexter McDougal. You're getting guys like Rashard Matthews.
What about the haul of guys at Denver? Apparently, is making a Demarius Thomas, Roby, Emmanuel Sanders is appealing to me. That guy is a professional. He's a nice player.
Playing well this year.
There's a lot of guys.
Yeah,
it seems like they're just saying, "Hey, here's a chest of guys. Come grab."
Yeah, I mean, the corners, that's another one. Bradley Roby and Chris Harris. That would, they excite me more because Demarius Thomas, I think his cap number next year is $19 million. I have no interest in him whatsoever. Sanders, but that's another. Why would they want to trade him to begin with? I'm not sure. I believe all that. Certainly, the Broncos aren't in a position to compete, and maybe they're looking for to be one of those teams like the Raiders. I mean, the Raiders are in that equation as well. Gary and Conley, a former first-round pick at corner. All these names are being thrown out there, and Jason Lockenford, God bless his heart. I mean, if you throw every name out there, you're bound to get one.
John, it's back to the drawing board this week for the team. What is priority number one in practice for Doug and the Eagles?
Well, I think priority number one is to make sure the Eagles don't use this week as a crutch because you have obviously going to London. They're trying to make it as normal a week as possible. Going late, which most teams do now. Back when they started this series, they wanted the teams out in London for the entire week, so you would practice there, do media availability, and it would become sort of a mini Super Bowl. They're trying to keep things as normal as possible, stay on East Coast time. They're leaving after practice on Thursday. So that's number one. It's just a strange week. And you want to make sure players aren't using the crutch of a difficult travel prospect as a reason for not showing up and playing the game.
John McMullen with us at JF McMullen on Twitter. We told you earlier, Derek Barnett out for the year. By the way, it's a torn rotator cuff. That is what he is out with, which is that's a tough one, man. That's a long road back, coming back from the torn rotator cuff here. And I saw somebody tweet this out earlier. They've lost McLeod, Barnett, Ajayi, Wallace, Hollins, Jernigan, Sproles, Sidney Jones. Jason Peters is in and out every week. You get to that lost season territory where last year you were able to, John. It's too much to ask for them to do it again, right? Is that fair?
Yeah, I think it is fair, and that's where I kind of said, talking about the trade deadline, I mean, do we have that same sense of urgency with all these injuries? Is it realistic to say you can get back and be a significant contender? Ultimately, I think the Eagles answer that question with a yes, but I do think you have to at least ask that question. Nobody's even asked it at this point, just assuming they're going to be buyers, and they're going to be significant buyers because the window is perceived to be open. Do they all of a sudden become sellers? I doubt that, but I do think it's a conversation that needs to be had because of all the injuries.
Yeah, that's
an interesting point of view, by the way.
Well, and that's what I'm thinking is if you look at the sense of urgency, or at least perceived sense of urgency, hey, you got to get somebody. And then to your point, John, and more so, the Skins are not running away with anything. So this division, if you just have your sights set on the NFC East and winning the NFC East and knowing anything can happen in the postseason, it's almost like you can make a pretty legit argument for standing pat, seeing that this team has performed well, even in losses at times, and their performance hasn't put them out of anything close to being eliminated from this division like the Giants.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Eitan. I would, say there's going to be a move, but I don't think it's going to be as high profile as people would like. And I agree. There's a new path now, and that path is the NFC East title. It's not a first-round bye. It's winning a bad division. And you're right, the Redskins are certainly not going to run away with it. 2 games up in the loss column. But if you're the Eagles, you look at it and say, we have the best quarterback, we have the most talent, and we still have 5 division games.
Right.
So I do think that's the way you have to look at it.
All right, I'm not going to criticize him as a human being. I'm just going to say I don't believe him when Doug Peterson says that he has confidence in the run game. I just don't believe it. Or you know what it is? Maybe it's not that, because he has shown for 3 quarters, John, that he does have confidence in the run game, but in clutch moments he doesn't.
No, yeah, that's fair. I mean, I wrote about that today on 973ESPN.com. Bottom line is Doug Peterson's an NFL coach. He's not going to throw people under the bus. He's going to say, I have confidence in this, I have confidence in that. But when it comes down to it, he wants the football in key situations. He wants the football in the hands of Carson Wentz. That failed him against the Carolina Panthers.
So if Doug walked in, go ahead.
But as I asked everyone in that piece, who do you want who do you want the game on their shoulders? Do you want it on Carson Wentz's shoulders or Wendell Smallwood or Corey Clements?
Can I have both?
I think.
Can I have 3rd down, put it in the hands of Wendell Smallwood, and 4th down, put it in the hands of Carson Wentz?
Well, it becomes, Wendell Smallwood. If Carson Wentz does his job correctly, and he comes off Alshon Jeffrey.
That's fair.
Because it's double coverage.
Very fair.
And then he goes to his next progression, and Wendell Smallwood catches the football in the slot. You have both of them. But, again, I always talk about making good decisions from a player standpoint. Well, from a coach's standpoint, the good and the proper decision is to put the game in the hands of your best player, not put the game in the hands of your 3rd-string running back. Okay. That is not a good long-term decision. I'm sorry. Sometimes you make the right decision and bad things happen. But if you do it consistently, good things will happen on a more consistent basis. I can't criticize Doug Peterson for putting the game in Carson Wentz's hands. I can't do it.
I could agree with that. Sometimes the element of surprise, like, how did that guy beat us? You know what I mean? Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah,
Torrey Smith is the guy.
but...
Like, at the end of the day, we're like, kidding me? Torrey Smith is the guy that gets open? Or who? I don't even remember the schmo who ran around who was that guy?
Well, it is, yeah. But
Samuel.
I
Samuel.
guess
Good for Samuel. Who's that guy? They gave the ball to Samuel in that situation. Like,
Curtis Samuel.
Yeah, go ahead. Good for Curtis Samuel, right?
Yeah, and it's an end around, and that's part of what the Panthers do. But, hey, people love the aggression when it works, and then they're criticizing the guy when it doesn't work. Mm-hmm. I mean, remember, after they're down 21-17, after the Panthers score a 3rd consecutive time, everybody's down, the sky is falling. What do the Eagles do? Boom, deep shot to Alshon Jeffrey.
Yeah.
Long pass interference, but there's the aggressiveness. Puts you on the cusp of winning the game. Everybody loves it. Everybody loves it. And then all of a sudden, you want to go in a shell? I guess I don't understand. Remember when Penn State lost to Ohio State? This was my criticism. James Franklin got destroyed for his play calling at the end of the game. And I'm saying to myself, this is a spread offense coach. This is what he does. He runs zone read. And then all of a sudden, at the key point of the game, the fans want him to turn into Bill Walsh and draw up this amazingly intricate, brilliant play. You are what you are, is what I'm trying to say. You practice what you are. The Eagles are aggressive. They have a superstar quarterback, and that's how they're going to play. And for the most part, people love it until they don't love it.
If Doug Peterson could walk in to Howie Roseman and ask for one thing, what's Doug asking for?
Well, Doug's asking for a wide receiver because he doesn't care about the defense, like most offensive coaches. What he should be asking for is a cornerback or a defensive tackle. But, I mean, he's an offensive-minded coach. He wants to throw the football. And I think he wants to be able to play more 11 personnel and 3 wide receivers. So from his standpoint, I think he would want the wide receiver. How he's got to build this entire team, I think it's more important to bolster defensive tackle or get a cornerback in here.
At JF McMullen, you're shaking your head over there.
I just don't think they need a cornerback. I respectfully disagree with you in the sense of between the 20s they probably do, but the red zone defense in the secondary, John, and I don't have it in front of me, but just going on eye test, has looked really strong. And I guess I would say it this way. Maybe this is bad logic, but I don't want to assume that by upgrading a position, that position was hurting you. Defensive tackle, I'm with you 1,000%. I just disagree on the cornerback. That's all.
Well,
and feel free to call me an idiot. You've
part,
heard me long enough.
Now, until the Carolina game, I agree with you. The red zone, and that's the strength of Jalen Mills' game.
Yeah.
But the entire game is not played in the red zone. It's nice that they've been able to recover, but we've been talking since early in the season, since Atlanta, since Indianapolis. If you keep sort of being on that, with that sort of Damocles hanging over you, eventually it's going to drop.
Well,
and it has dropped.
Here's real quick, John. Defense gives up 19.7. Last year, 18.4. This year, they scored 22. Last year, they scored 28. Isn't that your difference, right? The defense is basically the same, playing at the same level. Your offense is scoring a touchdown less.
You won't find a smarter analogy, by the way, than the sword of Damocles. Do you know the audience that you're talking to? I mean, come on. It went over 99.9% of people's heads. It was beautiful, but my goodness.
But Mike knows I never dumb it down for anybody. But, the offense, if you're asking me overall what the biggest problem with this team is, offense versus defense, I'm going to say offense. We're coming off a game, though, where the defense imploded in a bad way in the fourth quarter, and they imploded twice if you count the fourth quarter and overtime. So you're trying to win games, and Jim Schwartz always talks about he's not a stats guy, which I can tell you is completely true, and it's all about winning on a particular game day. So his defense, from his standpoint, wasn't good enough. Then you put the injuries and the moving parts with the secondary. You know, if Sidney Jones was healthy, if Rodney McLeod wasn't hurt, if Corey Graham wasn't hurt, I probably agree. They don't need to add something
That's
there.
fair.
But we're talking about injuries as well.
All right, so go out and get Peterson. We'll call it a day. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. He's John McMullen, back every day right here at 4. You only hear him on 97.3 ESPN and the Mosher McMullen and Krause Show and the Countdown to Kickoff Show.
You're
Sundays,
everywhere, man.
3 hours before the game. All right, pal. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
All right. Thank you, guys.